the principle is still the same. We design systems so that no matter what, cold, heat, humidity, static electricity, fire, power loss, whatever, the data is still available. When we're talking about integrity, again, we're talking about nothing taking away from what it's supposed to be. So when we deal with malware, viruses, other malicious attempts at the data, we're talking about threats against integrity. Similarly, with user error is also another area where we talk about threats to integrity. If false information can be introduced into your data, well then you're going to be relying on incorrect information. It's like the old expression, garbage in, garbage out. One of the biggest sources of garbage in is actually user error though. So what do? We build systems that have validation and checking. Perhaps you've been to a website, I'm sure you've been to a website, where if you don't enter the information correctly, it throws up an error message and does not let you submit to the server. Well, this is an example of a validation rule that's employed to prevent garbage from getting into the database to maintain the integrity of the system. Now, if you have good access controls, intrusion detection, you can generally overcome, I should say, potential intentional threats. But something like validation and application controls, the unintentional. Now, in some cases, integrity is a matter of not knowing who is involved in a transaction and being certain of who's involved. You may employ some form of digital signatures or hashing algorithm. We'll talk more about that when we get into cryptography a little later in the course. Now, again, confidentiality, we're talking enforcing secrecy, maintaining propriety, not allowing unintended, unauthorized disclosure. So we handle this by monitoring the network and looking at how the information is controlled, because the potential threats include things like someone snooping on the network, trying to pick up information that's being exchanged. So what do? We encrypt information as it's transported. Shoulder surfing, someone coming up behind a person, looking over their shoulder, reading what they're doing on the screen. That is an out of band or offline human sort of interaction, but it still accomplishes the same thing. Training your users and making sure that they know how to maintain a clean desk policy and not let people look over their shoulder while they're working and engaged in confidential work. This is one of the ways you mitigate this. Social engineering, which we'll talk a little bit more about, particularly as we get into that aspect of this track, but also as we get into the CEH certification videos. We'll talk more about shoulder surfing and other sort of deception that's part of a social engineering attack. But whether it's accidental or intentional disclosure, the point is you mitigate confidentiality risks by ensuring that data's handled properly, the personnel is trained properly, and that no information that's meant to be confidential is ever transmitted in the open. Everything is encrypted with a strong enough encryption mechanism. Now here are the terms I talked about earlier. Critical terms: vulnerability, threat, risk, exposure, and a few other terms we'll add on to that. First, a vulnerability is a weakness. The weakness can be in the software, it can be in the hardware,